Hello and welcome to Kumi Now. Thank you for joining us for this latest online gathering as we talk about nonviolent movements in Palestine. My name is Marie Claire. I'm originally from Canada, but today I'm joining you from the Sabeel office in East Jerusalem. Before we start, I'd like to remind you that our webinar is being broadcast live on Facebook and will also be posted to YouTube. If you want to make sure your photo does not appear online, please turn off your camera. We would also love it if you would quickly share one of the links that is being shared in the chat so that others can join this webinar. As usual, if you have an idea or project that you'd like to share in the future, please email us at kumi@kuminow.com. Now it's time for our weekly activism survey. We will now launch the poll. Please note that there are 3 questions. So scroll down for the third. So the poll is now running. If you don't see it, please select polls at the bottom of your screen. Here we go. I can see that it's popped up on people's screens and people are now participating. This is great. Thank you so much. So we're just going to give it about 1 more minute. Okay, we're going to wrap up the poll now, and I will go over the answers with you all. So the answer to our our second question, what is the meaning of samud? Steadfastness. The concept has become a popular form of nonviolent resistance that began with Palestinians who labored to maintain their homes and lands during and following the Nakba. Question number 3, why did Israel deport Mubarak Awad? The answer is the final answer. He advocated for civil disobedience. Israel kicked him out in 1988. 5 years earlier, he had opened the Palestinian Center for the Study of Nonviolence in Jerusalem with the goal of encouraging mass resistance to the Israeli occupation in the West Bank and Gaza. He advocated tactics such as refusing to pay taxes, only consuming local Palestinian goods, and engaging in peaceful protests. He was born in Jerusalem, but in 1988, Israel refused to renew his residency certificate, and he was eventually deported despite the protest of the US Secretary of State. So, now that we've wrapped up our poll, we're going to move on to our topic for today. We have a very interesting and informative session planned. I'd like to start by having everyone you're going to be seeing today introduce themselves. So, Badia, would you mind starting us off?
How are you, everybody? Good evening from Palestine. From Hebron. My name is Badia Duwek. I'm a human rights defender activist. I'm also a founder and also the leader of the National Association of Human Rights Defenders, which is based in Hebron. And also I have been founded many also youth organizations to fight the Israeli occupation before. And also many campaigns, like the campaign which is called Free Shireen Isawi campaign, which is a Palestinian lawyer. She has been jailed in Israel jail, and also Shadi Farah, who used to be the youngest jail when he has been arrested when he was 12 years old, and he kept in jail for 3 years. That's who I am. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Badia. Cody, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for everyone who could join tonight. And my name's Cody. I'm part of the Good Shepherd Collective, and we're based in Beit Sahor, working primarily in Jerusalem and the southern part of the West Bank.
Thank you. Omar will be joining us today as well to give us our usual update from the ground, but he's just running a little bit late, so we're going to flip the way that we usually do things. So now we're going to turn to our main issue of the week, nonviolence in Palestine, and our special guests, Badia and Cody. As they speak, if you think of a question, please type it into the chat, and I will try to ask as many of them as possible when we get to the question and answer period. Badia and Cody, please go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start the presentation about the recent things which has happened here in Hebron. And as you know, guys, that we use Hebron as a micro example to talk about the whole situation representative in Palestine, because Hebron, who is coming to Hebron, and I know that some of you get the chance to be in Hebron, to leave the situation of Hebron. It's representative many of forms of discrimination and apartheid system which is exist in Palestine. But in Hebron, it's can be more powerful, and you can feel it, and you can leave it, and you can touch it even when you come to visit. So that's why when we talk about Hebron, that we use Hebron as a micro example to talk about all the means and also the forms of apartheid system that Israeli occupation exists in Palestine. So the situation of Hebron, as you know, that Hebron, let's just say that we have about 111 major checkpoints and crossroads right now, and this is the biggest number which is exists in Palestine right now, and that's why it's make the life for the Palestinians more complicated. And also you can add for that that there are also closures areas and the places which is Israel occupation make it in the heart of the city, which is make the life for many of Palestinians families are isolated and also very difficult and hard to communicate between each others, because Israel occupation, they were working and they still working about this is policy to divide the division itself. After they divided many of the places and areas in Hebron, so they come and divide it again. So that make the communication between the families in the same areas difficult, because some of families and many of them, they are become living inside in small jails or cages, this to say. Such of the situation which is in Shuhada Street or Tal Mede or Wad al-Nasara, which is closer from the biggest settlement in Hebron. And also there are a major checkpoint, which is, we call it Shuhada Street, but the army, they call it Shutir or 56 meter checkpoint, which is this is checkpoint. It exists in the north side of Shuhada Street, and Shuhada Street used to be the longest street, which is used to be linked the north side of Hebron with the south Hebron, south part of Hebron. And after the massacre, which has happened in 1994, Israeli occupation, they were already announced this is area and this is compound area as a military zone area, not allowed for the Palestinians to exist any life there. And when we talk about Shuhada Street or Tal Mede, and specifically about Shuhada Street, it wasn't just a street, it was a compound area. There were about 6 or 7 neighborhoods, Palestinian neighborhoods was connected and belonged for this street, as Tal Mede and the Old Town, and also Qitun neighborhood, and also Abu Sneina neighborhood, and also Jabal Jarrar neighborhood. This is all of those neighborhoods used to be belong and connected with Shuhada Street, and Shuhada Street was representative like the mind in the body, because many of commercial and business and financial business was going there, and was many of taxi stations, and they used to be the main bus station in this is area, and they used to be also the only that time the only wholesale vegetables and fruits markets in that time, not just for Hebron, even for all the villages which is part of Hebron, for Hebron district. And there used to be the main bus station also, which is after that it's occupied and converted to be a military base. So after the massacre, that Israeli occupation, they shut down this Shuhada Street, as what happened in the Old Town also, which is the Old Town. It's represent for us the culture and the identity and the history of the city. So when the Israeli occupation controlled the mind, which is the Shuhada Street, and the compound area of Shuhada Street, and the heart, which is the old town. So the Israeli occupation already they affected all the city and they controlled all of the city. Now, what is the recent things as part of this is massacre, because massacre is not didn't stop, and the massacre is still going in our life as the Nakba. The Nakba never stopped, and the Nakba effects is still running off the Palestinian life. The same as the massacre. The massacre which is happening in Hebron, still the effects of this is massacre living with us, and we're still living the results and the effects of the massacres. And Israelis applying several policies, which is this is policies, it's against the international law and against the humanitarian law, like collective punishment. When we talk about this is military boss and the closures area and all the closed roads, this is also put a lot of pressure against the Palestinian families who are still and remains to accept the challenge and to live there, to applying what we call it sumud, the steady fast tense, to live in these places, despite all of this is pressures which has come by the Israeli occupation, whatever by the official level, which is the Israeli occupation soldiers, or by the settlers who are, which is I consider them the second army in Israel, but without uniform. That is the difference between them and between the army. And the recent situation was also very intense, as always. Situation in Hebron never been quiet, and always it's worse. Who have been in Hebron before, like 20 years or 1 year or like 3 years, and come back again, he will see and he will discover always the situation in Hebron is more tense and more complicated and worse. So the recent situation. I brought Amira Hess, which is an Israeli journalist, to report about the situation. And even she talked with me and she said, what is going on Hebron now, it's like a daily torturing to torture the people in their daily life, to push them to leave the Hebron till they are completed their project and to take over all the city in the old town, the Jewish, which is they call it the Jewish neighborhood. So they already start with this project and they are managed to do part of this project. Now they are working about the families who are still remains and living there. So recently there were many of physically attacks happened against Palestinian families who are living in, for example, Shuhada Street, in the Salami neighborhood, in the Jaber neighborhood, and there were settlers, there were attacks, Palestinian cars, and they broke their windows, their homes' windows, and the cars itself. There were also attacks, families by gas, the paper gas, and I am a witness of some of those families who have been went to the hospital and interviewed them, and I meet them in the hospitals. And two of them, they are my friend and from our group, from a Human Rights Defenders group. And also Shamsi, Abu Shamsi family and others families like Abu Aisha family and myself, I have been attacked by the settlers when I was recording the settlers attacks against the Palestinian families in Tel Media about like 3 months ago. And I was attacked under the Israeli army camera. And when I went to make a complaint against the settlers who have been seen by the soldiers, and that by the police, when they were attacked me physically, they didn't do anything for them. And they broke my camera, which is cost about 800 euro. We use kind of cameras belong for our project, which is, we call it capture occupation camera project, which is very costed, but very is necessary and vital to record and to reflect the family's stories and to capture it, tell the people around over the world to see what has happened. So they are escalating with the violence of the settlers, with the protecting and cooperation with the army. They are very clear that army have a cooperation with the settlers and they protect them till they are achieve their points, which is this is points, push the Palestinians by this is pressure, and this is physically attacks and psychology violence and physically violence to put them in the corner and to push them to think that to live by themselves. Then the sisters, the Israelis, they will say that those people have been left by themselves. but they left because all of this is tactics and all of this is brochure of the Israeli occupation. They are use it against the families. I hope that if Ryan can play the video, which is talk about what I was mean with the camera project, because this is very vital project we are doing, and we do also many other work to make the life for the Palestinians it's more available to support them, education. We used to bring international people and some Palestinians students from other cities to come to visit those families. And this is a project which still exists, and we're still running this project behind of other projects with the children. We have also 2 projects to deal with the children. And this is camera project. Will show you that how many importance the camera in our work, and show you up also the violence of the settlers and the Israeli occupation, which is applied against the Palestinians, and also why we need to support. This is the Fundism racism campaign in USA and other places in the world to stop. This is fundraising which is coming, and this funds which is coming for the settlers. If you please can just play the video, tell the people they can learn about what we do.
من سنوات طويلة ونحن نستخدم الكاميرا، يعني التقيت أنا كإنسان أتعرض لانتهاكات واعتداءات من قبل المستوطنين على بيتي وعلى أطفالي، فاستخدمت الكاميرا كوسيلة للدفاع عن نفسي. نحن نقوم بتوثيق كل الأحداث وكل ما يجري من اعتداءات وانتهاكات ضد المواطنين الفلسطينيين، وتوزيع هذه المواد على الإعلام الفلسطيني والعربي والدولي.
The Israeli occupation now, they are working hard to exist. This is law which is prevented the Palestinian people to capture the soldiers when they are doing crimes and violence against the Palestinians. And this means the Israeli occupation, they want to tell one story, which is the Israeli occupation story, and they want to confiscate the Palestinian story by they are confiscated the toll which is still the story which is the camera.
يعني الاحتلال بقانون وبدون قانون، عندما هو احتلال عنصري فاشي يحكم المواطن الفلسطيني والأراضي الفلسطينية بقوة النار والحديد، وبالتالي هو لا يريد تشريع مثل ذلك القانون، لأنه فعلا هو يمارس عملية القمع الصحفيين.
Israeli soldiers and settlers as well, many times they have been beat me, and I have been many times arrested. My home, it's been raided, for example, last year for like about 5 times or 4 times by the Israeli soldiers after the midnight in order to scare me and to stop me to keep filming.
يعني الاحتلال دائما يعتدي على من يحمل الكاميرا، وتعرضنا للاعتقال عدة مرات، وأيضا للإيقاف على الحواجز الإسرائيلية لساعات طويلة جدا، وأيضا وصلتنا تهديدات من قبل جنود إسرائيليين ومن قبل المستوطنين بقتلنا وبتهجيرنا من هذه المنطقة، وأن نوقف عملية التصوير والتوثيق ونشر هذه الانتهاكات.
this is a part of our resistance. So we try to transfer this experience, which is we have from generation to other generation, because we see and we understand very deep this is kind of the work and the resistance which is we do by the camera is very important resistance, which is can feed our story and our issue as Palestinian cause.
Thank you for that very powerful video, Badia. Was there anything more you wanted to add before Cody speaks?
It's okay. I will give more time to Cody in order to talk about the campaign, which is we are working together about it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'm now going to turn things over to Cody.
No, thank you. Again, my name's Cody O'Rourke, and I'm with the Good Shepherd Collective. I think just one thing I'd like to add onto Badia's speech real quick before we transition into the campaign is especially now how critical the work is that Badia is doing. For those of us who spent time in Hebron and who are connected to Hebron in various ways, will remember that over the last couple of years, there's been no internationals in Hebron because of the coronavirus, right? So that means that Palestinians are carrying a much larger burden than before, documenting all of this stuff. Over the last couple of years, the temporary international presence in Hebron, remember TIFF, they were kicked out of Hebron. International Solidarity Movement, another organization that has historically been on the ground in Hebron, they're not there right now. The Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine, Israel, the EAPPI program, they're also not there right now. So all of that documentation that's been going on for decades, which has been uncovering, what Badia said, Israel's system of apartheid, that is increasingly falling on literally Badia's shoulders, because so many other organizations have pulled out. So as Ryan puts that link in there, I think this is just another call to say, hey, funding this camera work that Badia does and his organization does is absolutely critical. It's one of the most critical pieces of Palestinian resistance that we can invest in as a solidarity group. So having said that, there's some other pieces that I saw also floating in and out through the chats, kind of wondering, what is nonviolence resistance? Like, how can we participate? One of the things that Badia had brought up about this campaign to defund racism is he highlighted how active the settlers are there in Hebron. In Badia's word, they're like the army without having military uniforms on. And it makes sense because most of the settlers have in fact served in the Israeli military. They know what they're doing. Not only do they know what they're doing, but they also know how to play by military rules. They know how to press on the soldiers there, to push them into Badia's house, to push them into Abu Shamsia's house, to allow them to wage their campaigns across Tel Rameda, Shahada Street, Jebel Johar, et cetera, all of these neighborhoods in Hebron. And so as organizations who think about nonviolent resistance, we don't think of simply nonviolent resistance as resistance with the absence of violence. We think rather in terms of how do we disrupt these systems that perpetuate the violence. And when we see systems, we think of laws, we think of policies, we think of financial resources, we think of political resources, we think of cultural resources, et cetera, et cetera. So when we're mapping out these sort of resources, it's about taking these resources away so the instruments that are available to enact violence is disrupted. So in our analysis, when we look at the creeping expansion and the perpetual occupation that's happening inside of Hebron, we see that the vast majority of that happens in and around the settlements. As Badia had pointed out, where there's settlers, there's violence. And when we do our analysis, we see that, especially in the Hebron community, that there's a tremendous amount of charitable dollars going into Hebron. Since 2002, about $30 million from the U.S. alone has poured in to the Hebron community. Now, the Hebron community, those settlers in and around the very center of Hebron, there are only about 8,000 settlers that live in the heart of Hebron. Okay, I'm going to send you a link to the campaign and that statistic. Those of you who are in the United States will see that on there, you can look up each individual 990 tax form, and see each successive year how much the Hebron Fund has donated to the settlers in Hebron. It's roughly about $2 million a year the last few years. So the Hebron Fund, which is a charitable organization registered in the United States, is able to take US tax dollars and funnel that money to the settlers' communities in Hebron. And so that money goes towards litigating to have Palestinians evicted from their homes. That goes towards security measures. In some cases, most recently, there was a court order that actually ordered a settler to be moved out of a house that was stolen on Palestinian land, Palestinian house. And the JNF, which is also a charity, actually gave this Israeli settler, moved to give this Israeli settler $34,000 to stay in that Palestinian home. That's US charitable tax dollars at work. Okay. So when we are thinking about designing these campaigns, when we thought about this campaign to defund racism, which calls on the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, to revoke the organizations that are financing these settler groups, not just in Hebron, but in Jerusalem, but also inside of historical Palestine, like in the Negev, in the Negev, in those Bedouin communities. There's these charitable organizations that are also financing the displacement of Palestinians in Haifa, also in Nazareth. So when we're building this campaign, the first thing we asked ourselves is how do we develop a campaign that is both impactful, but also a campaign that is winnable? And that's critical to think about campaigns in that way. We see, for example, we develop a campaign and we get some obscure band from Norway not to come play the bongos in Tel Aviv. It's like, yes, we have a success and we get some band to change their mind not to come play at some cultural event in Tel Aviv. And it's great, we won that campaign, but how do Palestinians experience the occupation any differently the following day? It doesn't impact them. It doesn't change the way that their homes are demolished. The resources that perpetuate Israel's system of settler colonialism all remain. Okay, so it's a campaign that's winnable, but it's a campaign that's not impactful. Okay, the flip side of that is that the campaign to stop military aid, to stop U.S. military aid to Israel would be a very impactful campaign. To be able to stop $3.8 billion and going into Israel's military would be an amazing achievement. And immediately Palestinians would feel would feel the impact of that. But on the flip side of that, the movement is so far away from getting that $3.8 billion stopped that it's not a winnable campaign in the short term. You know, most recently in the United States, there was a bill that was passed to give Israel an additional $1 billion on top of that $3.8 billion. Several of the most progressive Democrats, Jamal Bowman and AOC, both refused to vote no on that. You know, we're still a lot of ways away from building the sort of power to be able to hold our senators and our representatives responsible for passing that sort of legislation. So our argument is, with this campaign to defund racism, our argument is if that even if we can get, you know, $100 million across the settler movement to stop flowing into these Israeli settlements, into these these vigilante groups like Im Turtzu and Regavim, et cetera, that Palestinians will in fact experience the occupation in a completely different way. You know, when these organizations don't have these sort of resources, for example, the $34,000 that was just donated to a settler family to stay inside of a Palestinian house in Hebron, Palestinians would experience life in a completely different way. Okay, so it marks the first check. Is the campaign impactful? Yes, it is. So that brings us to our next question: is the campaign winnable? And our argument is that yes, it is, because the Attorney General of New York is one person. One person. That's critical. They're also an elected official. That means that you're able to push on the ground, mobilize on the ground, her constituency in order to hold her accountable. Okay. And so what we saw in that our research before is that whenever people had went to try to challenge US tax dollars flowing into these Israeli settler networks, they've always failed because they tried to either push it through Congress or they tried to take it through the IRS. That's why our campaign is designed to hold someone accountable through their constituency. You know, even these different BDS campaigns, like there's a BDS campaign about 3 years ago with Airbnb. Do you remember this? All of a sudden, Airbnb was like, "You're right, we're going to pull out of the settlements." And then as soon as there was some backlash, they changed their mind like that. Okay. Like that. The very next day or the very next week, all of a sudden Airbnb was relisting, you know, Israeli properties in Israeli settlements. So the other point about this campaign is that if we win this campaign, a reversal can't happen the next day, right? Because it's going to be bound up legally, right? It'll be a legal decision that's solidified that you can't just backtrack out of because some executive feels some additional power, right? And that's critical, because what we're trying to do is create structural changes. And what I mean by that is changes in laws and changes in policies. You know, like clearly we want to change like individual opinions, but changing individual opinions don't necessarily change in the long term how Palestinians experience the occupation. But if we can change laws and policies, what the campaign aims to do, then Palestinians experience things differently. So this campaign is essentially a national call from the Palestinians on the ground. Palestinian villages, Palestinian activists, the Palestinian NGO network. Hundreds of Palestinian NGOs, village and activists have all made this national call to say, hey, look it, we want you to invest your time, your resources, and your energy into this campaign, because it fits that requirement of being both an impactful campaign and a campaign that is winnable. So as we move towards wrapping this up, I want you to go ahead and think about, what sort of questions you have regarding this campaign, what your concerns are, and go ahead and log those in, and then we'll get to those in a little bit.
Thank you so much, Cody and Badiah. You have provided us with some important information about the current situation in Hebron and conveyed how essential it is for us to find ways to be in solidarity with the current situation there, such as the campaign to defund racism, which we'll turn to further in a moment. I was also really struck by how you framed nonviolence, which is our theme for this week. You talked about nonviolence as resistance that aims to disrupt systems of violence and create structural changes. And I just wanted to lift that up because I think that's a really important definition. So like I said, in a moment, we're going to turn to collective action together as a group, and then our question and answer period. But first, I'm going to turn things over to Omar from the Sabeel office to give us some quick updates from the ground.
Thank you, Mary Claire. I will give a very short update. It's important to continue to remember the 7 Palestinian prisoners who are under administrative detention and have been going through, many of them have been going for over 76 days in their hunger strike and protesting Israel keeping them without charging them or without trial. In the picture is Murad Atiyeh. He is one of the leading activists in Sheikh Jarrah. He's been arrested for over 2 months now under administrative detention. Israel has not charged him nor has sent him to court. His sister's wedding is coming up. His mother made an appeal for his release, and actually they have called his mother the past 2 days for interrogation. They continue the intimidation to control the community. Sheikh Jarrah is currently closed. That's why there's a lot of traffic in Jerusalem. There are certain holidays for the Jewish settler families who are living in Sheikh Jarrah. Palestinians are not allowed in or out of the neighborhood unless they can prove that they are living in this specific neighborhood. However, many settlers all around, from all around Israel are going into Sheikh Jarrah with hundreds of Israeli soldiers every night, staying, holding parties in their celebrations. We have started the olive harvest season. Unfortunately, there are some houses, unfortunately, there continues to be attacks on certain Palestinian farmers or Palestinian olive trees. A number of trees have been burnt for different Palestinian farmer communities in the Nablus area. These are common attacks by settlers during the olive harvest season, when more Palestinians go into their fields and they become engaged in picking olives or taking care of their land. The past 2 days, Silwan has been under attack. A number of Palestinians, over 12 people were injured in the attack. Israel is trying to send bulldozers and change the landscape of people's lands in Silwan area. Many Palestinians got hurt, including children. This is a wonderful photo that a friend of mine and ours, many of you know Rami Hanan. He is one of the founders of the Parents Circle. He lost his daughter many years ago in a suicide attack in Jerusalem. And instead of turning into grief and depression, he, together with other Palestinians who have lost their loved ones in attacks and in the violence, in the cycle of violence, they joined the Parents Circle, where both the parents of the bereaved families, parents of lost people who have lost their loved ones in the conflict, they work together to for justice and peace. He shared this photo from a checkpoint, and he said the people on his Facebook, and many people follow him, and he said the people who can smile genuinely like this in the midst of oppression and humiliation at a checkpoint after standing for hours are a group of people who cannot be defeated. And this is very much is echoed with Badia and many wonderful people who are working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar, for those updates. We're now going to move to our action for the day. So since this week is focused on nonviolence, we're using this week to also promote Kumi Now. So in a moment, you'll see on the screen, or I think you can see on the screen now, ways that you can promote Kumi. So you can find a way to promote Kumi Now by speaking about it with a friend, sharing your experience doing Kumi Now with your religious community, giving a presentation on it to a class at school, or posting about Kumi Now on social media. We've also heard about some really exciting ways that we can directly support Badia's work and supporting the Defund Racism campaign. So I'm going to turn it over to Cody and Badia just to briefly reintroduce these campaigns to us once more and ask if they have anything further that they'd like to add. So Badia or Cody, feel free to say a few more words about the campaign and how you'd like us to be involved before we turn to our action period together.
Badia, do you want to say a word or do you want me to?
Cody, would you like to say a few words? I see a cat on your
Yeah. So I think the most relevant thing is at this point is if you can go to the website https, I'm putting into the chat, defundracism.org, and sign your name. That's one thing. If you are connected to organizations, if you're part of an organization, ask them to endorse the campaign. You know, take it up as it being one of their focuses of advocacy. And then 3, take the time to email your friends and family about the campaign. These are simple ways that people can get involved immediately. And of course, people are reaching out to us and asking other ways that they can get involved. And when you sign up, we send out a follow-up email immediately with some action steps, some additional action steps that you can take. So go to the website, https defundracism.org.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're now going to give you about 5 minutes to get started, engage in some action. The information is all up on the screen, both the Defund Racism campaign and the Kumi action. So go ahead, get started for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back together and have our question and answer period together with Cody and Badia. Thank you.
I just want to, okay.
Sorry, please, Badia, please jump in.
Okay, first, my name is Badia. This is how to pronounce
Badia.
it.
My apologies.
I just want to recommend it, a documentary film. It's been made by BBC about our work, which is called A Weapon of Life. And this is film, it can give you some more ideas about a part of the work which is we do with camera projects. So if people they interested to watch it, you can find it online in YouTube. I will write it here in the chat, the name of the documentary film.
Thank you so much, Badia. Okay, so we're now going to turn to our question and answer period. There were a lot of questions put in the chat, so we'll try and get through as many of them as we can. I apologize in advance that we might not get through all of them today. Question number 1, Badia and Cody, from your experience, what forms of nonviolent resistance are effective against the IDF and Israeli settlers?
Okay. Personally, I have been expressed and used many forms of the resistance against Israel occupation. For example, I grew up in the first Intifada when I joined the first Intifada, and I'm talking about the Intifada which started in 1987, and it was the first time that the English dictionary was got the name of Intifada. And I was, in that time, I was 15 years old, and I was throw stones, put checkpoint in the street, settlers buses, throw them stones, and also Molotov bottles and so on. Then I converted that non-violence. Okay, I believe and trust that the international law it's allow and for all the occupiers people to use all the forms of the resistance. But I see that in our cause as the Palestinians, it's the non-violent resistance can be the best way that we can use it against the Israel occupation, as what happened, for example, in other countries. We have other examples. I know that we cannot copy all of these examples and to make it particularly in Palestine, but we can also use some of these models and of this resistance, and we try to make it more familiar with our resistance and our conditions. As what happened in South Africa, they used in the beginning, they used violence, and then they are turned to use non-violence resistance, and they win. Non-violence is give us the chance to cooperate with all international people who are believe and support the Palestinian cause, and they trust that Palestine cause it's a need to have justice and freedom. And those people who are around all over the world, it can be more easy for them to work and to join the resistance and the struggle of the Palestinians when we are using non-violence also. And that we see that the camera, it's, for example, what we are used now, the camera, for example, as a weapon, but is not a killing weapon. It's a peaceful weapon. It's a weapon of life, as I said in the documentary film, which is we capture the images and the violence and the criminals of Israel occupation, which is happened against the Palestinian families, and we reflected, and we just reflected for the people who are in abroad who didn't get the chance to watch it in the mainstream media, for example. And this is we cannot say, for example, who is more important. Let's just say, for example, when we talk about social media cannot feed the information about the situation of Palestine and other places in the world without to have cameras shoot this is images and this is videos, for example. So the I think the non-violence resistance it's can built in three main big pillars. Let's just say the action in the ground, which is I mean here non-violence resistance actions in the ground, and also media. And I mean that in media, we use the cameras with the social media, the mainstream media, which is we can use it also if we can manage to use this mainstream to our side. And also the legal stuff, the law, the international law. So if we are managed to link all of this is pillars with each other. So I think that we can make some more achievement in our war and we can reach our goals. You watch that how was effective when the cameras and the social media was reporting about the situation in Gaza last time when they were bombing Gaza. And you saw that all the world was rising up and there were a big intifada in the world against Israeli crimes at that time. And this comes by the social media and the camera, which can be a part of the resistance. But this is not the whole things. Resistance also need to resist in the ground against the settlements, and against the occupation, against many of titles which is representative of the Israeli occupation. But I can say that in our work and in our project, you cannot see the violence and the criminals of the Israeli occupation without our cameras, because our cameras is the eye of the international world about what is going on here. Especially, it's become more needed and become more vital and necessary after the Israeli occupation dismiss the international representatives from Hebron, and also many international organizations, they are left Hebron because, and Palestine generally, because of the Corona situation. So that it's the vital of the camera, and side by side with other forms of the resistance, which is, I mean, the non-violent resistance, I think that we can make something, we can achieve something when we are, if we are succeed to link all of this is three big pillars: the law, the international and the legal things, with actions in the ground, and also media, which is include the camera, because the camera, it's reflected the story. It's an independent tool, and just tell and reflect the people what is going on and the story in the ground. And I think, and I believe that why I am now 100%, I believe with non-violent resistance. And also, in the end, you can exist more peaceful society without violence, without guns. I know that the guns, it's everywhere. Beit Salem, they are not provide us with cameras. Their Beit Salem, they have their own project. When I, with my friends, when we decided to run our project, camera project, which is, we call it Capture Occupation Camera Project, the idea from that we wanted to have our Palestinian organization with Palestinians identity. That's why we decided to have our own projects with our own cameras. We are not like Beit Salem, a big organization, have a lot of money to buy cameras. We are really surviving hardly to continue because we have no budget. We are just surviving by some of fundraising coming from here or here and here to support our cameras. But right now, I'm really happy with the work which we do. And don't forget that we have been filmed many of intense story as a murder of the story, which has happened with Abdel Fattah al-Sharif in 2016. And many other stories. You can watch it in the documentary film, which is A Weapon of Life. And behind of that, as part of the resistance also, we are working to empowering the families who are living in the closures places to keep them remains in their places, which is, we call it the sumud. So to feed their sumud, we have to offer for them something. So we offer for them an education classes for free, and also Hebrew classes, English classes, camera training, make videos, short videos. We also have now 2 projects cooperating with other organizations. We have 2 projects for the children. One of this projects is continuing for 1.5 years, and another one for a year, in order that to empowering the whole family and also their kids and the mothers who are staying and remains usually more time in the house to define their houses and to when the man go to have a work. This is what I can say. The resistance is different forms and tactics, and Jane Hard was talk about more like 180 forms of this is resistance. And I was an honor to learn from some people who was applied resistance from Otbor group in Sarajevo, in Serbia. And also I was also learned by some people have been also resist against South Africa apartheid. And also I am, as a Palestinian, have my own history. And we don't forget that Palestinians, one of the first people, they were also used an nonviolent resistance in the longest strike happened in 1936, which was civilians strike continues against the British mandate for 6 months.
Thank you, Badia. one of the things you noted was the importance of the camera being like eyes to the rest of the world. And one of the questions that we received in the chat was if you're able to get this footage out, and it sounds like you are, to international media. But I wonder if you could speak about some of the challenges that you face doing that.
Yeah, to show this is video, actually, when we talk about it, it's very easy to talk about it. But when you leave the situation of shoot this is videos, it's very difficult and hard. And sometimes you find your life between the death and between the life. But because of that, we are determined and to use these photos to make people to open more eyes and hearts around all over the world about what is going on here. So we have to do that to shoot as much we can rich videos and the violence of Israel occupation to expose this is occupation. So we face a lot of troubles. I have been arrested, for example, and my home have been raided many times. And you can watch some of those videos that I was shot when the soldiers that were raided my homes. And I've been arrested like more 19 times and detained more 19 times by the Israel occupation. And also my home been raided. Some of my kids personally have been arrested. And one of them, he had been detained and arrested 3 times when he was 12 years old. And one of another child of me was detained in the street when was soldiers and he had a surgery in his body and he stayed in the hospital before the army detained him like 2 months. And there were an article, I wrote it myself about this is article about the emotion of the parents and about the feeling when they see one of their child 16 years old or the 12, 15 years old detained by the army for no reason. You can find it. I can share it with you later. And also, I have been representative of our group to talk when you talk about that, if we manage and we succeed to take our photos out to the international community. Yes, I did a speech. I have been invited and hosted with many thanks for those organizations and those people who have been invited me and hosted me around the world in different places to make a speeches about what is going on in Palestine, about the human rights situation in Hebron, about the resistance which is we applying against occupation, about our resistance, about our project, Camera project, and about the other projects like the empowering project and the education project for the families. And also at the same time, I've been representative also my organization to speak in the Human Rights Council in Geneva to talk about the problems which is we face it in our life. And also we have good connection with some other organization like Sabil, for example. We have a good connection and relation with Sabil. And many times Omar was brought to us delegations to educate them about the situation in Hebron. We did also arrange for them to have lunch with the families, for example, to support them and many other things. And also we have relation with other organizations. We hope to have more. We have an ambition to have more and to exist more and to cooperate with more organizations so people that can live wherever we have more cooperations and contacts, people that can be more involved about our work. I have been, for example, part of our resistance, which is this is very interested for you as you are, many of you American. I have been one of those people, the freedom riders, who have been ride the settler bus in order to go to Jerusalem to apply for the freedom of movement. And at that time, we have been arrested in that time. And this is, we converted from the experience of the resistance, which is that Black people have been used against the apartheid or the discrimination been exist in America. And we use it in different messages also, like that we would just want to show the international community, the apartheid system, and also the discrimination with Israelis, the use against the Palestinians, and also about the freedom of movement as one of the very simple human rights, which is not even available for the Palestinians. Even here about just like I am far about Shuhada Street, like about 5 minutes by walk. I cannot walk in Shuhada Street. This is about freedom of movement. I cannot, I have to pass the military checkpoint. I have been to humiliate many times, and this has happened for others also. But this is about also the collective punishment. And all of this is illegal according to international law. And also when we talk about the childhood, they not have enough places here to have fun and to play and to educate here. This is also about the childhood, about the housing, our houses. As I told you that my house been raided many of times, and many other families like Imad Abu Shamsiyya, who is also one of the activists, and also Arif Jaber, who is living on neighborhoods have been attacked by the gas, and his family was his home raided. Many stories. There are many stories coming every day. Not just about families. Also, we are, as a human rights, we become very well known for the settlers by our names and our faces, and we become very target for them. So that all, this is all. And I told you that I am now 40 years old. I am 48 years old, and I started the resistance against occupation since I was 15 years old. When I'm arrested for the first time, I was 19 years old, and I spent 3 years old, 3 years in Israel jail. This is never break me down and take me to feel for the responsibility to make my duty to liberate from this occupation and to educate people around the world about what is going on in Palestine.
Badia, thank you so much for your witness, for your powerful words for us today. Unfortunately, we're already over time, and I know there were a lot of questions that we didn't get to. I just wanted to see if either of you wanted to give us any closing words before we wrap things up. If there's any sort of, in the span of a minute, if you have anything left that you were hoping to communicate, I invite you to do so.
You want to add something, Cody, or you want me to continue?
I think I was just going to say, thanks again for everyone, who showed up, showed support, who signed the petitions, everyone who made a donation to replace the cameras that were broken. Yeah, I mean, thanks for showing the solidarity. It's moments like this that allow us to continue to do the work. Hopeful that we can see change.
Thank you. Badia, did you have anything else that you wanted to share with us before we wrap up?
I don't know if there are any question that I missed, so I can answer it.
There are many questions left, but unfortunately, because we're over time, I don't think that we'll be able to get to the rest of them today. So instead, I'm just going to thank you both for taking the time to be with us. It was such a pleasure to learn from both of you, and I encourage everyone who's on this call to follow up with the Defund Racism campaign, which is in the chat. Next week, we're going to be focusing on mental health in Palestine, both the mental health effects of the occupation of Palestine and particularly the blockade of Gaza. So if you'd like to be reminded of the online gatherings an hour before they begin, you can register for email reminders at kuminow.com/online using the form at the bottom of the page. Again, a big thank you to our two presenters today, and we hope to see the rest of you back here next week. Thanks again, and good night.